Hey everybody, it's me. I'm your surprise guest. JD had some things he needed to attend to, so I'm going to jump on here and share a little bit from First Corinthians with you guys. We miss you and look forward to hanging out in person soon. But until then, we're doing videos and we'll be doing our Zoom hangout tonight with middle schoolers at 7 o'clock. If you don't have an invitation, let us know. You can scroll down on this page probably and see how you can do that, or text us or whatever. Just let us know you want to be a part of the Zoom hangout, and we'll get that invitation to you, and you can join us at 7 tonight. We're looking forward to that. I wanted to jump in this chapter 9 of First Corinthians, but before we do that, I'm just going to wrap up and kind of review what you've been talking about with JD 2 weeks ago and Sarah Beth last week. So JD was in chapter 7, and basically there he was saying, hey, look, time is short, so invest in things that really matter, and what really matters is relationships. And that's our church motto. It says investing in relationships with God, one another as believers, and the world, so the people who are lost and that need Jesus out there. And then Sarah Beth got into chapter 8, where she's talking about how love is more important than knowledge, that we need to build each other up by loving them, especially younger or new believers who need some encouragement, and we don't need to be stumbling blocks about anything in the way that we teach or preach or whatever, that we need to be mindful of how we can encourage new believers in the faith. But getting into chapter 9, Paul is basically kind of addressing some of his critics in relation to how he goes about his ministry. But basically he's saying, look, I'm in debt to no one other than Christ. And so I'm going to preach anywhere, whenever, wherever I can, so that people may hear the gospel. And so we get some glimpse into his philosophy about what motivates him as a preacher of the gospel. So we're going to look at chapter 9, verse 19, and a little bit following, and we'll talk a little bit about it. So here we go in verse 19 of chapter 9. Paul says, though I am free and belong to no man, I make myself a slave to everyone, to win as many as possible. To the Jews I became like a Jew, to win the Jews. To those under the law I became like one under the law, though I myself am not under the law, so as to win those under the law. Later on he says, to the weak I became weak, in verse 22, to win the weak. I've become all things to all men, so that by all possible means I might save some. I do this for the sake of the gospel, that I may share in its blessings. So basically Paul is just saying, look, in order to be able to win people to Christ, we got to get in their shoes. And even though I'm free to do whatever I want, I'm going to make myself a slave, and I'm going to commit myself. I'm going to give up my own interests, my own comforts, all these things, to be able to connect with people so they can hear the gospel. So that means that we have to kind of engage with people who might be our enemies or don't think like us. And if we're constantly putting down people that we don't agree with or whatever, chances are we're never going to have the opportunity for them to really hear the gospel and the love behind that if we're just kind of talking down to them. So it's about identifying with the people that we're trying to help and win. Even that means if we're getting uncomfortable, if we're doing things. So that's something we need to think about. What are we willing to do in order to help people hear the gospel? So we can't just stay in our own little bubbles, and we can't just stay in our own little circles and expect to reach anybody that needs to hear the gospel. So that's some encouraging and challenging words there. And Paul goes on to say in verse 24, he compares kind of his training and his commitment to preaching the gospel to how people train and compete in races. So in verse 24 he says, do you not know that in a race all the runners run, but only one gets the prize? Run in such a way as to get the prize. Everyone who competes in the games goes into strict training. They do it to get a crown that will not last, but we do it to get a crown that will last forever. Therefore, I don't run like a man running aimlessly. I don't fight like a man beating the air. No, I beat my body and make it my slave, so that after I have preached to others, I myself will not be disqualified for the prize. So a lot of you guys have committed yourself to some sport or academics or some other hobby, dance, or whatever it may be. And you've probably worked really hard to get better at that. Maybe you compete for some prize. You're trying to get certain grades. You're trying to win certain trophies. You're trying to get certain scores, whatever it may be. And you go into some training to win these things. But that trophy or that certificate or that report card or whatever, it's not really going to last as itself. We're doing this, the investment we're making in sharing the gospel and trying to live for God, we're doing this as an investment to win something that's going to last forever. And that's an eternity with Christ and a kingdom filled with people that we have helped get there by the way that we're committed to sharing the gospel. And Paul just talks about how, hey, that's the blessing that I get to experience in sharing the gospel, is knowing that I've helped people come into knowledge of God and salvation in Christ, and I'm honoring God with that commitment to His gospel. So we need to be mindful, one, of how we're training ourselves to share the gospel, and hopefully, as you guys, middle schoolers, are growing in your faith, we're trying to help you own your faith while you're in middle school. That it becomes real and personal. But as you're trying to own your faith, we hope that as you're growing as a disciple, one of the areas that means is that you're growing as someone who shares the gospel. You can't really be a disciple of Christ if you're not willing to share the gospel. It's one and the same. But I know that can be intimidating when you're in 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th grade. So here's some practical things that you can do to kind of begin that. And over time, you're going to mature in this. And hopefully, if you take this seriously, that you will kind of try to train yourself. And we try to do that when we're with you in different ways in your time as a CBC youth. But here's something very simple that you can do even when in quarantine. Just let people know that you do church stuff. If you're playing a video game and you're about to stop because you're going to a Zoom hangout, or you're texting somebody and you say, hey, I got to go. I'm going to go hang out with my church friends. Let them know that you're involved in the things of God, and that may open some opportunities to talk about things. When you're talking with your friends and they may be concerned or frustrated about all this quarantine and isolation, say, well, hey, I'll pray about that for you, or I'm praying and I'm feeling better about this because I prayed, or I read my Bible today. Just share what you're doing in your spiritual lives with people. It doesn't have to be that you're doing some big presentation to them, although at some point that is part of what sharing the gospel is actually sharing the truth of that gospel. But I just want to encourage you, just in these moments where we're kind of disconnected and we have very few interactions, just simple things like that. Just talk about your involvement in church. Talk about the spiritual things you're doing, and try to become as a way to identify with people. And, whatever your friends are interested in, as long as they're like healthy and positive things, maybe jump in and try to figure out what their favorite game is, or, what their hobbies are. Just try to find a point of connection where you can, then share the truth, or just express that you love them and care for them by your interest in them. So these are some cool lessons from Paul. Try to identify with people, train yourself to share, and take every opportunity you can in a simple way, just telling people about what you're doing. So that's all I got for now. I hope you'll watch this video and again join us for Zoom later tonight. We miss you, we love you, and hopefully we'll be together soon. But until then, we'll see you later. Bye. Thanks.